So I disappeared from social media for a few months, and honestly, it was probably one of the most important resets I've had in a very long time. So let's see. The last time I posted anything was either the last day of last year or the beginning of this year. I honestly don't even remember which one it was, but I guess it really doesn't matter. But since then, I've been completely off social media. So that means absolutely no post, no updates, nothing. And here's the truth. The truth is, I really needed that time, that space, because over the past couple of years, my life went through a pretty dramatic shift, especially financially. So let's get into it. A couple of years ago, I was living off my investments. I was working part time, mainly to just keep my health insurance, right? But my investments were covering the rest and like literally all of my lifestyle, any and everything I wanted to do. At one point, my accounts were hovering uh, right around $1 million or so. And here's the crazy part: I actually have a degree in finance, right? So this wasn't this wasn't coming from someone who didn't understand money. I studied finance. I've always been interested in investing. Spent years trying to understand exactly how money works and how to make it grow. Passive income, right? And for a while, things were working. So let's see, I was involved in the crypto space and I had placed some capital across different investment opportunities and with different traders who were managing money and generating different returns. The numbers were growing, withdrawals were happening, and it genuinely felt like I had figured something out, like I was finally winning. I wasn't out here trying to live all flashy either. I wasn't pulling out huge amounts of money just to spend it. I didn't go out there buying a bunch of things just to have things, if you will, or start living recklessly. I just wanted freedom and I had it. I could do what I wanted when I wanted without needing to check my finances first. I wanted my money working for me so I didn't have to rely on this job that I didn't enjoy. So I kept things simple. I was working part time, again, mainly for the insurance benefits because I do deal with medical issues, which we'll talk about too. And the investments were covering everything else. So at one point, as mentioned, I had generated well over six figures and was just shy of crossing into seven figures. And I've never seen anything like that. So for someone who had never seen that kind of money before, that changes the way you think about what's possible. And I have to say, honestly, I did what most people say that they would do, right? I invested it. But what people don't talk about enough is what happens when things stop working, right? So over time, I started spreading money across different investment strategies, different investment opportunities. This is what an investment world is called diversification. So if one thing slowed down, something else would keep producing and kind of cover that, right? But what I didn't think about at the time was something called risk stacking. Okay. So that is basically when multiple investments went south and withdrawals and different investments, they literally started collapsing all around me and all at the same time. Everything unraveled very quickly, very fast, not what I was expecting. And then eventually withdrawals started to slow down. And not only did they slow down, they eventually stopped. So some of these investment firms collapsed. Some traders even lost the money. In one case, I was even told a stop loss wasn't placed on the trade. In other situations, platforms were shut down and withdrawals were just frozen. Nothing I could do about it. Money that once felt secure suddenly wasn't accessible any longer. Now, when that happens, reality hits pretty hard and very fast, right? So I remember I'm sitting in my office one day checking my accounts, and then I realized I didn't even have rent money. Not that I was low on rent or I didn't have enough rent, I completely did not have it. And then I received an eviction notice. Uh, and that was the moment everything became real for me. It got real, as we would say, right? So at that point, the investments that were supposed to be producing income weren't accessible. Bills started piling up, and there was no quick way to recover. That's when I realized everything had completely collapsed and I literally lost it all. Eventually, I eventually had to go back to work full time and start earning income the traditional way. Right, not something that I was not used to, and good thing I never knocked anybody for having jobs. Never was in my DNA, but that's what the reality was. And I had to face the financial consequences of not listening to the advice of taking larger withdrawals and the way things ultimately happened, um, including filing bankruptcy, right? So I ended up filing a Chapter 13 bankruptcy in August of 2024. It wasn't something I wanted to do, but it did stop the eviction process. And it gave me the breathing room I needed to start getting some things in order. Now, I'm still working through that process now with the goal of finishing my bankruptcy next year in 2027. We'll get into that on another video and the different kinds or chapters of bankruptcies. But the financial part is only one side of it. There's also the emotional side that a lot of people don't talk about. So, comes with that is embarrassment, frustration. There are relationships that change when money changes. So some people who were around when things were going well literally disappeared when things were not going as well. You find out pretty quickly who was around because of you and who was around because of the situation you were in, and even honestly what you could do for them, right? And during this break from social media that I'll just keep coming back to, I realized something. I've never actually told this full story publicly, right? Like a lot of people online, I shared all of the good parts, right? Which was happening all the time. The wins, the progress, the moments when things were working and working well, but I never really talked about the full journey or really the aftermath of the wins. And if I'm being honest, I was probably just as guilty as anyone else who only shows their highlight reel, right? That's what I was doing. Another thing that I realized is that everybody has opinions about what they would do if they had the money, right? People would often say things like, I would have done this, or I would have invested in that, or I would have played it safe. But there's a big difference between imagining you having the money and actually managing it when it actually shows up and you see it in your accounts, right? So because that was my first time in my life that I had ever seen real money like that. Like not four figures, not five figures, but six figures. And when that happens, you make decisions with the information and experience that you have at the time. Now, of course, looking back, um, of course, there are things that I would definitely do differently. But that's how experience works, right? If you talk to people who are actually successful, and success comes in different ways, but particularly financially successful, a lot of them will tell you the same thing, being that they've taken way more losses than wins, like hella losses than wins. The difference is that when the wins happen, they're big enough to more than cover the losses, right? But the reality is, a lot of people are rebuilding their financial lives quietly. And almost nobody talks about that part or those individuals or putting themselves in a position to be relatable. Most of what you see online, or at least most of what I've seen online, is the finished product. You see everyone with the houses, the cars, they're showing their bank account after everything has already worked, after they've gotten the big win. But very few people show the part where you have to start over again when you're actually in that rebuilding process. Not even building, meaning you built it, lost it, and you're starting over when you're trying to figure things out all over again. This is where you're making different decisions because you've already seen what can go wrong, right? And honestly, that's pretty much where I'm at right now, right? I'm just simply rebuilding. And I'm rebuilding everything. So I'm rebuilding my finances. I'm at a point where my emergency fund is back in order. We'll talk about that. My credit is improving. We'll also make videos about that. And I've started investing again, but this time with a completely different mindset. But rebuilding isn't just about the money, as mentioned, right? It's that emotional side. It's also about rebuilding the way you think, your habits, the way you approach life after you've been through something like that. A lot of people don't bounce back from that. So, this channel is going to document that very process. We're going to talk about the financial rebuild, but also what I'm learning along the way, right? That emotional mindset shift. So, what I'm learning from studying scripture and applying it to both life and business. Number one book by far. And just in general, what I'm learning from all of my reading material. Also, what I'm learning in therapy, what it looks like trying to even pivot careers and move into tech and specifically GRC, what it looks like improving on my skill set with AI and figuring out new ways to create income with AI, right? And this isn't like from an influencer perspective. I'm not trying to do that, but just from someone actually doing the work and figuring it out in real time in a real way along the way. Because I know that I'm not the only person going through something like this. I can't be. There's no way, right? I know that there are a lot of people, or at least I think there are a lot of people out there who had things going well until they didn't, and they found themselves in these same situations, who are out there quietly trying to figure out how to start over again. So from time to time, I'll share some of my process here. Some of the mistakes I made, some of the things I'm doing differently now based off of obviously past experiences, and just the reality of rebuilding, right? All of the ups and downs, plus also rebuilding myself spiritually, rebuilding myself financially, obviously, rebuilding myself mentally, and rebuilding myself professionally, right? So any of them, all of those LYs, right? And we're not pretending. This isn't to this is not coming from a perspective of like an influencer or a content creator. I'm literally showing the process. And if you've ever had to rebuild something in your life, financially or otherwise, then you probably understand exactly what I'm talking about, because that's exactly what I'm doing right now, rebuilding. And we'll get through it. So until next time, you already know, I'm out. Peace.